The footage wasn't supposed to exist, and yet here it is, a shaky zoomed-in clip that has now torn open the case no one thought could be questioned. For weeks, America was told a single story. Tyler Robinson was the rooftop sniper, the radical loner who raised his rifle, aimed at conservative firebrand Charlie Kirk, and pulled the trigger. But the footage says otherwise. Frame by frame, it dismantles the official narrative. The so-called assassin never fires. The recoil that should have followed the shot never happens. The smoke trail missing. And just like that, the impossible becomes undeniable. Someone else fired that bullet. So if Robinson didn't do it, who did? And maybe more importantly, who wanted us to believe he did? Charlie Kirk wasn't just another political figure. He was a movement loved and hated in equal measure, a man whose words could fill stadiums or ignite protests. But on that bright Utah afternoon at exactly 12:23 p.m., his voice was silenced in front of hundreds of witnesses. The country mourned, the media moved on, and prosecutors built their case on sand. Now, newly uncovered footage, digital leaks, and insider testimony are rewriting everything from motive to murder weapon. Because this wasn't just an assassination, it was a message powerful enough to kill for and dangerous enough to bury. Before we unravel what really happened on that rooftop, hit like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because by the end of this video, you'll realize the real shooter may still be out there.
Face.
September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. The air was crisp, the crowd electric. Charlie Kirk, conservative commentator, founder of Turning Point USA, and one of the most divisive political figures of his generation, was back on campus. He'd been here before. He knew this was hostile ground. UVU student body leaned progressive, its debates often fiery. But Kirk thrived on confrontation. He saw it as proof of his mission to take conservatism into the lion's den and walk out unscathed. Hundreds gathered that morning under the open-air plaza. Supporters waved flags and snapped selfies. Protesters stood along the periphery holding signs that read, "Hate isn't set free speech." And at exactly 12 p.m., the cameras rolled. Kirk took the stage with his trademark calm defiance. He joked, sparred, challenged his audience. His voice carried easily across the quad. Then at 12:23 p.m., everything changed. A single deafening crack split the midday air. The bullet tore through Kirk Sip's neck. He collapsed, the mic clattering to the ground, his hand clutching the side of his throat as panic erupted around him. Screams cut through the chaos. Some students dropped to the ground, others ran. A child near the stage cried out for her father. Security swarmed the platform, dragging Kirk's limp body behind the podium as blood pooled beneath the steps. For several seconds, no one understood what had happened. Then came the whispers, "Sniper, rooftop." It came from above. Within minutes, paramedics were on the scene. Within the hour, doctors confirmed the unthinkable. Charlie Kirk was dead. That moment, 12:23 p.m., became a timestamp that would haunt the nation. The country's reaction was instant. Conservative outlets declared it an assassination. Progressives, stunned and horrified, denounced the violence. Social media turned into a battlefield of blame, speculation, and grief. But lost amid the outrage was a quieter truth. A man had been murdered live in broad daylight, and no one could yet say why. Who had reason to silence Charlie Kirk? And was this really a lone gunman or something much darker hidden beneath the surface? Because as we soon learn, the real story didn't start on that rooftop. It started long before and ran far deeper than anyone could imagine. In the hours following the assassination, chaos gave way to control. Police briefings replaced confusion, and a single narrative began to take shape, clean, precise, and convenient. Authorities claimed the shooter was Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old from southern Utah, a former UVU student, politically active online and increasingly outspoken against Charlie Kirk and his conservative ideology. The official version was simple. Robinson had climbed onto the rooftop of the Hall of Flags before noon, waited patiently for Kirk to take the stage, and then fired a single fatal shot from a bolt-action rifle before fleeing the scene. By nightfall, his name was everywhere. His photo plastered across every network. The headlines read, "Like a script, campus radical assassinates conservative leader." Within 24 hours, the narrative was locked in place. The FBI, local police, and Utah County prosecutors presented what they called overwhelming evidence, the rifle, DNA, and a short string of text messages allegedly confessing to the crime. At a press conference, Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray stood solemnly at the podium. Cameras flashed as he declared, "The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy, and make no mistake, this was not random. This was a politically motivated assassination." The words hit like thunder. Within moments, hashtags like #JusticeForCharlie and #MAGA under attack trended nationwide. But the story was almost too perfect. A convenient villain, a tidy motive, and a clean ending, all within 48 hours of the crime. Robinson Stett's alleged confession text was vague, almost performative. He supposedly wrote, "I did what I had to." He was spreading hate. But investigators never recovered the original message, only screenshots. The rifle. It was registered to Robinson's father, not him. And though his DNA was found on the weapon, experts noted that trace DNA could come from simple handling, not necessarily firing. Still, prosecutors pressed on. To the public, the message was clear: case closed. To critics, it was too neat, too rehearsed. Meanwhile, Robinson sat in a county cell, refusing to speak. No formal confession, no clear motive, just silence. Yet, even as officials declared victory in solving the crime of the decade, cracks began to appear beneath the surface, faint at first, but soon impossible to ignore. Because when the newly released footage emerged weeks later, the story that once seemed certain began to unravel. And the man branded as a killer suddenly looked more like a scapegoat. It started with a single frame, a blurry 3-second clip released by a student journalist from Utah Valley University. The footage showed something authorities never mentioned: a second shadow moving across the lower balcony just seconds before the fatal shot. At first, investigators dismissed it as light distortion, but digital analysts who reviewed the raw footage disagreed. The motion wasn't random. It was deliberate, calculated. Someone was down there, not on the rooftop where police claimed Robinson fired from. That was the first crack. Then came the second. Ballistics experts quietly pointed out a glaring inconsistency in the FBI SEPZone report. The bullet trajectory didn't align with the alleged shooting position. The entry wound was angled slightly upward, impossible if the shot came from above. Former FBI profiler Dr. Lauren Keene, reviewing the data, said, "If you analyze the ballistic path, the bullet came from ground level, maybe slightly elevated, but not from a rooftop. Either the official report is wrong or someone SIP's lying." Still, the inconsistencies didn't stop there. Digital forensics revealed that the timestamps on the surveillance footage from the Hall of Flags were off by several minutes, manually altered, according to one anonymous technician. The question was why? And then the basement. Weeks after the shooting, federal agents returned to the mansion where Robinson had been arrested, a quiet, sprawling home on the outskirts of Provo. Neighbors had always described it as oddly quiet, with lights that flickered at strange hours. When FBI technicians re-examined the property, they discovered something no one was prepared for: a concealed door in the basement, hidden behind a layer of plywood and false insulation. Beyond it lay a narrow tunnel, barely large enough for a man to crawl through. It stretched nearly 50 feet beneath the property, reinforced with steel rods and concrete lining. At the far end, a small chamber. Inside, the remnants of old surveillance equipment, political flyers, and traces of latex gloves, syringes, and hair strands that didn't match Robinson's DNA. When the agents radioed it in, one officer later admitted, "Everyone froze. You could feel the air change. This was what we were expecting." The existence of that tunnel shattered the entire foundation of the prosecution's narrative. If Tyler Robinson acted alone, why was there a reinforced tunnel under his house? Who built it? And who were the others whose DNA was found there? The FBI went silent. Public records requests were denied. The Department of Justice refused comment. But one leak from a whistleblower inside the Bureau hinted that the tunnel wasn't just an escape route. It may have been part of a network, a hidden infrastructure used by a radical underground group that the FBI had been tracking for months. And the man said to have helped design it, a name no one expected to reappear: Lance Twiggs. The question wasn't whether Robinson was guilty anymore. It was what he had gotten himself into. When the tunnel's discovery broke online, the FBI said nothing. But the silence only fueled suspicion, and soon people started talking. The first to break ranks was a neighbor, Mark Jensen, who lived just 3 houses away from Tyler Robinson's mansion. In an interview with the Deseret Tribune, he described seeing unmarked vans arriving late at night, sometimes 3 or 4 in a row. He said, they set to park without lights, stay for maybe 20 minutes, and leave. No one ever got out through the front door, but the house always seemed full. That statement aligned with security footage obtained from a nearby gas station showing one of those same vans stopping for fuel around 2:30 a.m. the night before the shooting. The driver, a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt, later linked to Lance Twiggs, a local contractor turned political agitator. Twiggs' name had surfaced before briefly in old arrest reports tied to violent protests 2 years prior. But what tied him to Robinson was more than ideology. Leaked documents reveal that both men were listed as members of an online forum reportedly used by a radical anti-establishment collective, a group investigators now believe was an offshoot of a militant Antifa faction operating under the guise of LGBTQ+ activism. To some, that sounded far-fetched, but others were so sure. Former classmates of Tyler Robinson painted a very different picture of him. He wasn't the extremist the headlines described, at least not at first. He was soft-spoken, artistic, and politically curious. But after connecting with Twiggs and others in that group, he began posting cryptic messages online, rants about shadow governments, corrupt media puppets, and righteous revenge. Still, there was one witness whose account changed everything. A young woman known publicly only as Eva claimed she attended one of the meetings in that same basement before the tunnel was sealed. In her words, it wasn't Tyler Sett's idea. Lance was the one who said they needed a way out, a place to hide things. Tyler just helped, but Lance made it sound bigger, like they were preparing for something. When asked what something meant, she refused to elaborate, only saying that it had to do with silencing voices that threatened the movement. The implications were chilling. It wasn't just about one man's sex crime anymore. It was about a coordinated effort, one that may have used Tyler as both a recruit and a scapegoat. And as those witness accounts piled up, one question kept echoing through the halls of every newsroom covering the case. Was the tunnel a hideout or a staging ground? Even FBI insiders off record admitted the structure's purpose was unlike anything they had seen in a domestic terrorism investigation. The public began demanding answers. But for every question raised, another document disappeared, another file was redacted, another official refused to comment. It was as though someone wanted this story buried deeper than that tunnel ever went. For weeks, Tyler Robinson's name was dragged through every headline, every social feed, every comment section. He was called a monster, a traitor, a terrorist. But behind that mugshot, behind the headlines, was a story no one seemed to tell. Tyler was instead born into darkness. He grew up in a quiet Arizona suburb raised by a single mother who described him as gentle and easily influenced. Friends from high school remembered him as a gamer, a photography enthusiast, and a bit of a loner. He'd always searched for belonging, and when he found it, tragically, it was in the wrong places. After his father passed away 2 years ago, Tyler withdrew. He stopped attending college classes, spent long hours online, and began frequenting political message boards that glorified rebellion and justified violence in the name of ideology. That's where he met Lance Twiggs, the man he would later name as the mastermind behind the tunnel. Investigators now believe Twiggs preyed on Tyler's vulnerability, feeding him a narrative of injustice, corruption, and secret enemies. He gave him purpose. He gave him belonging. And ultimately, he gave him orders. In his recent confession, Tyler described Twiggs not as a friend, but as a savior figure, someone who convinced him the world was run by people who silenced truth tellers. He claimed the tunnel wasn't built to hide weapons, but to store truth, encrypted drives, recordings, evidence of what he called deep political deception. Whether any of that is true remains unclear. But what struck investigators most wasn't what Tyler said, it was how he said it. During his 12-hour interrogation, agents noted he oscillated between remorse and paranoia. He cried when shown photos of Charlie Kirk's body and then moments later whispered, "You don't understand. It had to happen. We were told it was justice." Psychologists who reviewed the footage described it as a textbook case of ideological grooming, the transformation of an isolated young man into a believer willing to sacrifice everything for a cause he barely understood. His mother, appearing in her first interview since the confession, said through tears, "That was just my son. That was someone else wearing his face. Lance took him from me long before the shooting." And as her words echoed across the screen, millions watching felt the same uneasy chill. Because if Tyler was manipulated, if he was simply the hand that pulled the trigger, not the mind behind it, then who was? The confession hit the airwaves like a seismic wave. Within hours of the FBI confirming the existence of the tunnel and Tyler Robinson's statement linking it to Lance Twiggs and their secret Antifa offshoot, the nation was plunged into disbelief, anger, and confusion. Outside the courthouse, emotions ran raw. Supporters of Charlie Kirk gathered, holding candles and placards, reading "Justice for Charlie" and "Truth Will Surface." Across the street, counter-protesters argued that the story didn't add up, that Tyler was being used to mask something even darker, a conspiracy reaching beyond anything the public had been told. Inside the Kirk household, grief took on a different shape. His widow, still visibly shaken, spoke for the first time since the new revelations. Her voice trembled as she said, "I thought the worst day of my life was when Charlie was taken from us. But this is worse, because now I realize we may never truly know why." Communities that once united under shared outrage began fracturing. Some demanded the FBI reopen every aspect of the case, arguing the new confession exposed flaws in the initial investigation. Others accused the Bureau of staging a narrative shift conveniently timed to redirect public attention from their earlier failures. Media networks turned the story into a battleground of narratives. Cable pundits debated whether Tyler's confession was genuine or coerced. Social media split into camps. Those who believed the tunnel story was evidence of a massive cover-up and those who insisted it was a delusion born of guilt. But perhaps the most haunting ripple came from ordinary people, citizens watching from their living rooms, whispering, "If this can happen, if truth can be buried right under a mansion, what else Don Sepp we know?" Even law enforcement morale began to crack. Unnamed agents speaking off the record admitted frustration with what they called layers of obstruction within the investigation. And one chilling quote surfaced from a leaked internal memo. "We've only scratched the surface of what sits beneath this case, literally and figuratively." The death of Charlie Kirk had already divided the nation. But now, with every new revelation, it wasn't just a murder investigation anymore. It was a mirror reflecting America's growing distrust, fear, and obsession with truth itself. Every high-profile crime leaves behind two stories, the one written in police reports and the one written in the public's mind. The case of Charlie Kirk and the shocking revelations beneath his killer's mansion has now blurred the line between both. What began as a single act of violence at noon that day has evolved into a national reckoning. It's no longer just about who pulled the trigger. It's about why so many were willing to hide what came after. The discovery of that tunnel and Tyler Robinson's cis confession has forced America to confront uncomfortable questions. How deep does radicalization go when ideology replaces humanity? How much of our justice system bends to political pressure before it breaks? And when truth becomes inconvenient, who decides what stays buried? Experts warn this case is a symptom of something much larger. Dr. Alicia Horn, a criminal psychologist who studied ideological violence for decades, called it a perfect storm of manipulation where belief turns into blindness and loyalty into silence. She added, every layer of this story, the lies, the cover-ups, the secrecy, reflects a society struggling to separate fact from fiction. Even in Washington, whispers have begun about oversight committees about whether the FBI's earlier statements were incomplete or deliberately misleading. For many Americans, this case has reignited an old fear that justice depends not on truth, but on which version of it gains the loudest support. Social media is ablaze. Hashtags like #TunnelConfession, #JusticeForCharlie, and #HiddenUnderTheMansion dominate feeds. Yet beneath the noise lies something far more sobering, the realization that people no longer know who to trust. Charlie Kirk's death has become more than a tragedy. It's a test of faith in our institutions, our media, and even one another. And as the nation watches, waiting for the next revelation, one question remains unshakable. If the truth could be hidden under one man's Sip's home for this long, what else might be buried just beneath the surface? Every great deception eventually meets its reckoning, And tonight, the question isn't whether the FBI found a tunnel beneath Tyler Robinson's mansion, it's what that tunnel represents. Because sometimes what we uncover in the dark says more about us than about the people we're investigating. The evidence, the confessions, the contradictions, they sieve all pointed to one undeniable truth. This case isn't just about Charlie Kirk, it's about the cracks forming in the very foundation of trust. The agents who walked into that basement said they went pale at what they found. But maybe they didn't turn pale from fear. Maybe it was from realization that something much bigger, much deeper had been operating beneath the surface all along. As this investigation continues, remember, not everything buried stays hidden forever. And in the pursuit of justice, every secret has a way of clawing its way back to the light. If you've been following this case, don't stop now. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over and new revelations could drop any moment. Like this video if you believe the truth always finds its way out, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what do you think the FBI really found beneath that mansion? Because one thing's as certain, the case of Charlie Kirk isn't sipped over. It's only just beginning.